Hello, everybody. Good evening. It is Thursday night, and it's the last official night of the Republican National Convention taking place in Milwaukee. So, my name is Monica Maybank, also known as the Holy Politician. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for participating in this live broadcast, and thank you for watching this back on the replay if you're doing that. I also want to encourage you, if you have not subscribed, please do. You can watch me over on YouTube. That's where I do these lives predominantly. So subscribe to YouTube. Just look up Holy Politician on the YouTube platform. But today I just want to talk about one, some of the things that have been happening at the Republican National Convention. If you haven't been paying attention, if you haven't been watching, it started on Monday and it's live right now. But don't go over there right now because you're watching me, but it's happening tonight and it will continue through this evening. But the Republican National Convention, but I also want to talk about some of the information that I've been gleaning and getting about President Biden potentially dropping out as a nominee on the Democratic side. So I want to talk about these things again. Everything that we talk about on this platform is through the lens of truth and holiness. So keep that in mind. We really want to be mindful that in this season we can expect the unexpected because nothing is as it was before. We live in a time where we see kind of just things that we could have never imagined or dreamed happening all of the time, right? Starting with the president getting shot at this past weekend. And so when you see things like this happen, you know that something is happening in the spirit. And it's important for us to be mindful that things are not as always they appear in the natural. And so voting with holiness in mind is really doing our due diligence to make sure that we are focusing on supernatural ideals when it comes to politics and policy. And I recognize that's not easy to do because we live in a fallen world. However, when the Holy Spirit is prompting you in a certain way, you better obey. And so, regarding the Republican National Convention, and I know a number of you probably have not been watching it, and that's completely fine. I'd encourage you to go back and do it. And I'd encourage you to watch the Democratic National Convention, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Watch them both so that you can deduce what's taking place in the spirit. So, a couple of things that I think are interesting and just want to quickly talk about is obviously the vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, officially accepted his nomination as the vice president. Some of you may have read his story or seen the movie about his life, Hillbilly Elegy. He is, unlike many Americans that grew up in the Appalachians, and he came from nothing, right? And he is, I believe, 39 years old and he's risen to this place of prominence. And, I think a lot of people can relate with his story, and particularly people that have been on actually the white demographic that feel like that they've been on the margins of society for many years. I think that they can identify with his story because of his roots. So that was interesting and notable. Also, there has been, a lot of focus on obviously what the current administration is doing wrong and what a potential President Trump could be doing right. Talking about the economy, obviously, we've all experienced the high cost of inflation. I think it's interesting that, obviously, presidents blame that on each other. I know that the economy started to falter during the Trump administration because we shut everything down and nothing was coming in, right? And nothing going out because of fears of the spread of COVID. So I think anybody can be blamed for the economy. However, there is a big focus on that. Obviously, a huge focus on immigration, and Republicans just, frankly, they're tired of the way that our country is being impacted because of illegal immigration in particular. So there was a big focus on that. There is a focus on, well, actually, a notable part of the convention is when Nikki Haley spoke. And if you didn't hear her speech, I would encourage you to go back and watch it because there were a few moments. Actually, I was nervous for her a little bit there because I thought people were getting ready to boo her because of some of the things she said. But one of the things that she said that stood out that I think people can relate with, just all potentially people that feel like they're not being heard by the Republican Party, is that she really encouraged the Republican Party to embrace diversity a lot more. that there are people that are fearful because they don't see themselves in the Republican Party. They don't see their issues really being addressed a lot. And I can understand that, because when you look at this convention, you don't see a whole lot of people that look like me at this convention. You do see a few talking heads that have been speaking, but when you look on the convention floor, most of the delegates don't look like me, or they don't look like other people of color. Now, who do we blame for that is the question, right? Is there anybody to blame? Do people of color, maybe they should point the fingers at themselves, because there are lots of things that they have believed because of what they have heard. But there has been this resistance for people of color, in particular Black Americans, to step their toe into the Republican Party pool. And so the lack of people of color is something that I think people have just wrestled with. When you look at the number of Black Republicans in Congress, there are five Black Republicans in Congress. And prior to a couple of years ago, I think there were only two Black Republicans in Congress. And for a long time, the only Black Republican in Congress was Senator Tim Scott. And so we have to think about, how do we not just look holistically at what's going on in our nation, but look and see how, well, why is it that for so long there has been a stronghold on specific demographics in society? And at some point, you got to really think and pray about that. Like, what's really taking place? Or maybe there is something that we need to remove, remove the blinders. If those blinders truly exist, that's up to you and the Lord to discuss and to decide. I'm here to present you with truth and holiness based on what we are learning about this political cycle. Obviously, tonight Trump is going to give his speech, and that probably will happen in an hour or so. So you can take a look at that. People have said that he ripped up his old speech, that he's getting ready to maybe just speak differently because his life was on the line last weekend. So we'll see what happens, what comes out of his mouth. You never know, right? You never know. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. The other thing that I want to talk about, which is really, it's all over the news, but I had the chance to actually sit in a kind of a backroom conversation with people that pretty much are on the ground, and they're writing the rules of the Democratic National Convention. And there's a lot of angst. I'll say that there's a lot of angst happening on the Democratic side about their nominee. A lot of angst is happening and coming out of the Democratic Party right now, because they just really don't know. They say that they don't know what's getting ready to happen. But we know that God foreordains every moment, that none of this is shocking or surprising to the Lord. But people are like, is the president dropping out? Is he not dropping out? But him dropping out really isn't as easy as we think. There are a lot of implications and a lot of, I guess, rules, if you will, and policies that are in place that could prohibit there from being a smooth replacement from Joe Biden. It's not going to be smooth, however you cut it. It's not going to be smooth. And so there are at least two major problems that are before us if he does decide that he's no longer going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. First, so Joe Biden, there are 4,000 basically delegates that you have to achieve at the DNC. There are 3,900 of those 4,000 are already committed to President Biden. And so with that being the case, if Biden does drop out, there would be a fight for his delegates. And then you need at least 300 delegates to be considered an actual nominee for the party. And so people would be fighting to get 300 delegates. And then you can't give more than 50 delegates per state. So in the big states that have lots of delegates, they couldn't have like a monopoly on the delegates. And so because he already has 3,900 of the 4,000 committed delegates, it's really going to be a strategic move as to, if he decides not to run, who gets those delegates. And they only have, 3 weeks before this convention takes place, where all of this maneuvering is going to need to happen. And so the transfer of delegates is going to be difficult. Some people might think it's going to be impossible. So that's going to be hard. Second, Biden has a war chest of resources, right? He's got millions and millions of dollars that he has fundraised under his name and under his ticket. Now, that money is not easy to acquire. So if you do have a new candidate, how are they going to fundraise enough money to try and switch the narrative or compete with the narrative coming out of the Trump campaign? Now, Kamala would have immediate access to that funding because her name is on the ticket. But anybody else is going to have to try and fundraise and just I can only imagine what that scenario looks like if Biden is no longer on the ticket. So from that perspective, it almost makes sense for them to be begging Biden to stay on the ticket. But because a lot of people are fearful that obviously he's going to have a hard time winning Donald Trump, they are trying to convince him to get him off the ticket. And so November 5th is right around the corner. It's not, I mean, it's literally 3 months away. And so the Democratic Party is dealing with all of these issues, and there's just a lot of noise happening on that side right now. And so, and the reality is, can Kamala really get all the delegates? I know a lot of people are excited because she's a woman of color. A lot of people excited because she could potentially become the first female president, but also the first woman of color female president. But would the delegates actually vote for Kamala? All of this remains to be seen. I think there's some fear involved that people are not going to support Kamala. At the end of the day, our goal and it behooves us to stand in prayer, regardless of how you decide you're going to cast your vote. We know that there is always a reason for us to be standing in the gap for this nation. The very fact that the former president of the United States' life was in jeopardy a few days ago should bring us all to a place of repentance and prayer, right? Like, this was not a hoax. This was something that actually happened in real life. And so it's really important for us to stay in the Lord's face. I've seen lots of people on Facebook and all over social media, people that are Christian, people that are not Christian, people of all different flavors and perspectives, basically thinking that the attempted assassination was a hoax, that it's an opportunity for the former president to try and gain sympathy, that he used a ketchup packet and squirted it on his ear. There's just been all kinds of conversation. And conspiracy theories sometimes are true, right? This is why it's important for us to seek the face of the Lord, to ask God for guidance, and to vote through the lens of holiness and to vote through the lens of truth. The only way that you're going to do that is by being in prayer and spending time in God's presence. And so I would encourage you to do that. We still have 3 months. Anything can happen within this 3 months time, but trust and believe me that what we see happening right now, particularly on the Democratic side, that's going to shift even more, right? So stay in prayer, because we're dealing with a United States that's constantly being deceived. Everywhere we look, people are being deceived. So stay prayed up, share truth when you find it, try to stay stay out of bickering, because now is a time where a lot of people are losing family members, when people start to fight. Just let people vote based on their own beliefs. Let them vote based on what they believe is true, and let God take care of the rest. God bless you all. Thank you so much for tuning into the stream. And I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. Go tune in over to the Republican National Convention so that you can check out the speech of the former president of the United States. God bless you and take care.